You set up the joke, you come in with the punchline. You set up the scares, you come in with the scare, right? The scare, whatever that is. And if your timing's off, both are not funny or scary.
We've all been there before. You take your seat inside the theatre, the lights dim down, the screen enlarges. Before you know it, you're transferred into a world of horror. Your expectancy of scares is sky high, yet you've seen hundreds of horror films already. But there you are, trying to second guess the director in order to allow yourself to be scared. To keep a level of freshness to the picture is near impossible in the horror genre, unless you're a master director, of course. Enter James Wan. Unlike many horror directors working today, Wan allows the studio little leeway in dictating the final product of his film. In an interview with IO9, Wan said, "There are many shades towards crafting a scare, and it's just knowing how to balance it out. I may have a battle plan on how I want to approach it, but I really let the emotion of the scene that I'm crafting take over once I bring my camera on set." This quote is utterly crucial to understanding the filmography of Wan and how he, so successfully, conjures up a scare. To dissect why Wan is one of the most influential horror directors of this generation, I want to offer up 5 facets of his style. Up first is the subversion and utilization of classic horror. Wan is the type of director that offers up a fresh look at the horror genre of every single outing, yet in each one of his films, you get a palpable feel of classic horror's influence on his style. With Insidious, for example, Wan borrows beautifully from The Shining. The classic film manifests itself in the character of the father, Josh Lambert. Josh's descent into mania eventually sees him turn from the everyday father to something eerily reminiscent of The Shining's Jack Torrance. Why is this so effective? It's simple actually. Wan takes a successful formula and retains its quality. Whereas most horror films, i.e. Amityville, attempt to show a father's rage, failing miserably due to the lack of audience emotion toward the family, Insidious does the reverse, what The Shining did. It focuses relentlessly on this family, every little quirk of theirs. In doing this, we begin to spot small little nuggets that plant seeds of suspicion towards the father. This makes the end payoff so gratifying for the audience and successfully sets up a warranted sequel. By utilizing a formula of a classic horror film and implementing it better than the majority of imitations do, Wan elevated the quality of Insidious a couple of notches. In fact, Insidious 2 further develops the symmetry of Josh Lambert and Jack Torrance. There are other influences too. You have the notion of a family torn by horror in The Conjuring 1 and 2, as well as the Insidious franchise, which is heavily influenced by Poltergeist, a film that, much like those 4, focuses very little on the grotesque in horror, save that mirror scene of course, and instead explores the idea of desperation within a close-knit family. These aforementioned classic films are utilised by Wan to get the mainstream audience on board with his style from the first minute. But you'd be mistaken if you thought that all Wan does is appeal to mainstream audiences. With Saw, for example, Wan makes a deep cut and acknowledges the cult horror fan. The film is influenced dramatically by the abominable Dr. Phoebe, a 1970s film that contains a game-like murder scheme, much like the one that spawned a silly amount of sequels. The reason why the first Saw works considerably better than the others is that it doesn't use gore as a crutch. Where the studio spotted money was in the gore, tantalizing audiences into watching the subsequent films that it spawned. Yet Wan's entry in the genre, however, was more of a psychological thriller that, much like his other films, utilized character emotion as the focal point and beating heart of the story. And just as a side note, it's a testament to Wan's quality as a director that he can elevate perhaps mediocre or easily exploitable ideas to a level that very others can. This is evidenced in Saw and Insidious. The minute he steps down from the director's chair, we are given mundane, cash grab pictures. Wan appeals both to the passive horror fan and the hardcore, which has certainly made him a hit in Hollywood as well as the independent scene. Moving on from the influence of classic horror in his work, the other facet I want to discuss is how he creates genuinely great horror set pieces. In horror, it's all about the build-up. Unfortunately, in mainstream horror, build-up has been watered down to a term simply meaning a crescendo of sound or a loud bang. But Wan, on the other hand, does not subscribe to this idea. A build-up in a James Wan film stems from the characters, their decisions, and then the slow burn pace at which he toys with the audience. Rather than your cliched setup of a fake scare followed by a jump scare, Wan instead lets you know that the scare is coming without faking anything. It's that eerie, riveting tension that makes his films so special. Because we know that Wan isn't setting out to dupe us with a cheap scare, it makes his work even more terrifying. And that's how he crafts such powerful set pieces. Sound design is important too. Sometimes a loud noise isn't enough to genuinely frighten the audience, yet on the other hand, neither is silence. Because silence welcomes a sudden sound. In the first Insidious, particularly the seance scene, a fabulous set piece of Wan's, we hear a heartbeat monitor and breathing intertwined. That natural human sound, almost animalistic, warns the audience of an impending slow burn scare. if you invest in his storytelling, the sound and images are almost surplus to the scare, yet he still executes them to perfection. As examples, look no further than the clapping scene in The Conjuring.
Hey, wanna play hide and clap?
The mask reveal in Insidious 1, or my personal favourite, the painting sequence in The Conjuring 2. And I want to zone in on this one for a few seconds. The average director or studio would have opted for a Valak jump scare right off the bat, but notice how Wan plays with the shadow, focuses on the impending terror, yet forces you to not bat an eyelid. It's genuinely masterful direction. The third facet of Wan's directorial style is how he dupes the audience. While Wan most definitely respects his viewer, casual or seasoned horror enthusiast, he still has to find a way to manipulate the audience. This is something I touched upon in my Wes Craven video, because the best directors tip their hat to the audience while simultaneously pulling the rug from beneath their feet. Wan does this to excellent effect in the films I have previously mentioned, as well as Death Sentence. The one unifying similarity they all have is that you never quite know what time of the day the scare is coming. Typically, daylight equates to audience relaxation in horror. There may be an eerie moment, but nothing outright terrifying. That's usually left to the dark when things go bump in the night, right? Not if you're James Wan, it's not. Wan will utilize the morning as though it's the night, and sometimes most of the terrifying scenes occur during the daylight. We need look no further than that aforementioned painting scene, or Frank possessing Janet in the same film.
Is that what I am? Is that what I'm doing?
If the audience are programmed to expect the worst from the night but total relaxation throughout the day, why not shake things up to wholly terrify them? This other quote from the man himself sums it all up. If they, the audience, feel like something is going to happen, or they think from an educational standpoint that something is about to happen because of all the moving parts, it's my job to break that expectation and show the audience something different. Another way in which Swan sends the audience one way and runs away in the other direction is seen once again in The Conjuring 2. At the beginning of the film, we see the two daughters pull out a Ouija board. The minute they do that, what follows is a unified facepalm from the audience. Not another one of those horror films, but that board instead has no bearing on the horror of the film. It sets nothing into motion. It just stands as a way of showing the daring relationship between the two sisters. Wan terrifically subverts a genre trope to fool the audience while also advancing character. This is why I honestly find Wan to be the modern day Wes Craven, or at the very least, the closest thing we will ever have to the man. The fourth part of Wan's unique and effective style is how he taps into humanity's primal fears. Wan doesn't only direct, he comes up with ideas and then funds them, allowing other directors to bring his vision to life. Even in the projects he directs, we see him tap into humanity's primal fears. Why is this? Well, it's easy to emotionally scare and manipulate the audience when all you have to do is focus on a subject matter that everyone can relate to. So how about Lights Out, a film that essentially takes everyone back to their childhood, a time when we were afraid of the dark. It's a relatable feeling and emotion which Wan decided to fund for the pure fact that it taps into human fear. And hell, since we've pretty much rinsed The Conjuring 2 for all its excellence already, how about the creation of the Crooked Man, a toy that comes to life? We can all relate to the fear of that possibly happening as kids, right? I know I was certainly haunted by that idea after watching Child's Play at such a young age. Wan so effortlessly forces his images deep into your brain and extracts those moments of vulnerability and fear, like the best horror directors do. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, is the way in which Wan favours characters over scares. Yes, they're horror films and yes, they're scary, but would they be as scary if we didn't care for the characters? Would the seance scene in Insidious build up with such palpable tension if Dalton was an annoying brat with no redeeming qualities? Would the decisions in Saw take such an emotional toll on the audience, something the franchise stopped doing after the first film? Would the final act of The Conjuring 2, which hinges so heavily on Ed and Lorraine's undying love for one another, work so well? The answer to all, and anything that would have followed, is no. A resounding no too. To give characters depth is to build an umbilical cord between them and the audience, and that cord feeds fear and connection between both parties. Every single scare is intensified, with genuine stakes being thrust forth. If there is no connection, the scares remain as silly jumps, part that we fleetingly remember and are quick to forget.
The characters feel real and they feel fleshed out, and you don't generally get that in horror films, which is such a shame to say, or at least in modern horror movies. And so I think, part of my love for classic older school horror movies kind of lend itself to more character development and I think people really like the characters.
Without overcomplicating anything, it really is as simple as follows. If you care about the characters, you care about their mortality. And if you care about their mortality, then every little scare that they experience, you do too. James Wan is a special filmmaker, one that has garnered circa $850 million in the worldwide box office. And this isn't cheap money either, it's all down to his brilliance. He's a true testament that box office numbers aren't down to simply appealing to an audience, they also stem from the quality and positive word of mouth that his films generate. To say he is the most exciting filmmaker working in the genre today would be an understatement. The man is a master of the highest order, and he still has many years of excellence ahead of him. Nobody can conjure up a scare quite like James Wan.